Today I'm going to show you how to make a clay shaker using a cylindrical form. So we're going to start off with a basic square piece of clay. So you're each going to receive what you see in front of you, the square clay. Your first job is to take the clay and using the palm of your hand you're going to pat the corners to make a circle. Like that. Once you have the circle or the sphere, you're going to take the fettling knife, that's this tool here. There's also plastic knives in your tool bin, and you're going to cut this in half. It's important that you cut it in half so the knife isn't towards one end or the other. So you want to try and get as close to the middle as you can. So we're going to cut this in half, and we're going to do one side at a time. So here you've cut this in half. You're going to place this down. Now I'm going to use a wire tool. And I am going to use the wire end, and there are different ends to different tools and all of them would work, but I want you to notice how when I dig out the center I want to leave at least 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dig out that center. Now you want to be very careful because you want your edges to be consistent, and you don't want to dig down too far because you want to keep this all the way through fairly thick. Okay, if you dig too far, then your clay is going to get too skinny, and you're more likely to have your clay shaker kind of start falling apart on you when you make your additions for later. Okay, so once you have that 1/4 inch thickness all the way around, and you can kind of feel with your fingers how thick the clay is. So if you think there are areas that are too thick, go ahead and dig out more. If they're too thin, well, you can maybe take a little bit of clay here and maybe put some clay in there and smooth it out. And try not to do that because remember we don't want to end up with air pockets in our clay. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Again, making sure that you have 1/4 inch round. Now the other thing you need to be careful of when you're scooping out clay is you don't want to change the size. You don't want to change the shape of this because eventually you're going to take these two and eventually we're going to be putting them back together. So we need them to kind of fit back together, and if you change the shape, that's going to be difficult to do. So we're going to scrape out this side. And again, remember you want about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. When you're scooping the clay, instead of having multiple pieces drying out all over your surface, try and clump them together. That'll help keep the clay moist and it'll keep it from drying out too fast. And again, you know, I'm not really pinching this. I'm just feeling kind of how I'm smoothing out the inside of any ridges, and I am feeling for thickness. I'm not stretching the clay, so you want to be really careful you don't stretch the clay. The next step is to create the sound. So using the clay that you have left, you're going to decide what kind of sound do you want. If you make tiny little circles or tiny little balls, and you have few of them, you might make a lighter sound. If you have thicker ones or heavier ones, and you have more of them, you're going to end up with a different sound. Don't crowd your inside too much. You want, when this dries and fires, you want these to be able to move freely within side of this space so that the sound is going to occur. If you pack it too much, you're not going to have very much sound. So I'm going to take a piece of paper towel. We're going to use the paper towels right from the classroom. Since I'm doing this at home, I'm going to use a regular paper towel. And I'm taking the clay and I'm wrapping this up. The reason I'm wrapping it up is because the clay, this being wet and this being wet, the clay would stick to the inside. So I'm just going to kind of fill this, put as many in as I think I want. Making sure that the clay piece is completely covered. And what's going to happen is when this fires, the inside of what's in here, the paper towel, is going to end up burning away and firing the clay little ball at the same time. And I think I'm going to make mine smaller. And again, you don't want too many. You want enough to make noise. So there's kind of like a happy medium in there somewhere. Look at the space that you have carved out and decide what number would be appropriate for the size that you've created for the opening and the inside. And then this is going to be my last one. Okay. Now I have all those little wrapped pieces inside. Now the next step is to score these edges. And when we score the edges, we want to make this look like a complicated tic-tac-toe board. I like to use the idea of a bird's nest. So again, we're just scraping the edge. For this, we're going to use a paper clip, and we're going to extend this out. And we're just going to lightly scratch the surface of the clay, going in one direction all the way around. And then I'm going to go in another direction, again, so it looks like a bird's nest. We want to be careful we don't gouge the clay, because if we gouge the clay, there's more likely that we could make air pockets. So I don't know if you can see how that kind of looks like a bird's nest, all the little twigs. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, now we want to put them together. So this is where you want to try and meet them. This is why it's important not to change the size. You can see that this one seems a little bit larger than this one, so hopefully they're going to be able to fit back together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put them together, and I want to make sure that my edges seal. Okay, and I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to kind of run my finger along the seam to begin to seal. Now some of you might be asking, well, aren't I making a really big air pocket where I'm going to have trapped air? I am right now. So at this stage of the game, yes, I have trapped air, but when you're done constructing your basic form and then transforming this into something completely different, so this form is no longer recognizable to create your clay shaker, then at the very end, we'll put your name, your initials, the date of when you made it, and then I'm going to take a paper clip such as this and I'm going to poke a hole through somewhere within your clay shaker. That tiny little hole is going to be enough to allow the air to come in and out of your clay shaker so that it is no longer trapped air, and now there's a passageway for air to flow. So now that I've kind of sealed this edge up, you can still see the line here. Well, we need to cover that up. So we're going to put that down, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take another piece of this scrap clay, and we are going to make go ahead and make kind of like a thick worm with it, and then we're going to roll coil. Now your next step is taking this coil and we're going to make Saturn. So I'm going to place this coil on the edge all around that seam until I have Saturn. Okay? Once I have Saturn, I'm now going to take my fingers, and this is the part that gets a little tricky. We don't want to press down on the coil because we don't want to flatten it out. What we do is we want to take a little bit of clay from this side, and we're going to kind of pull it over to the edge. I like to use my thumb for this. So you can see I'm grabbing just a little bit of clay. I'm not really pushing down, I'm pushing more towards the side. And this will stretch out your coil, so you may find at the end you might have a little extra. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So see how one side's down, now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side and blend it. This is going to support that seam so that that seam doesn't come apart. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to smooth all of this out. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because remember, you're transforming this into something completely different. So by the time you're done with your clay shaker, I should no longer see this sphere. This sphere has changed into something very different. And there you go. So now you're ready to take any extra clay you have, and I certainly have extra clay for you to use, but you're going to take the extra clay and you're going to go ahead using your clay tools and start building and transforming your shaker into the design that you have drawn on your sheet.